Welcome back to Motorsports Tech Talk with your hosts, Brian and Eric. Eric, how's it going?
It's the weekend, holidays. I'm just living the dream, man. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I got my I almost had my sim rig up and running, so
Fuck yeah.
that's gonna be sweet. I haven't done too much of the sim racing up till now, so I really want to get into that. So I just went all in on a setup, but there's a couple pieces
Yeah,
waiting to go in.
that's awesome. iRacing?
Yeah, probably mostly iRacing, maybe like the Assetto Corsa.
Sure. Yeah, it's a little more open source, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You had a little bit of racing this weekend too.
Yeah, I did. We raced 50cc Honda dirt bikes with street tires on them at a local indoor kart track facility.
Yeah.
So.
How'd that go for you?
Well, not great, but also great. Right, we were slow. Granted, it was the first time everybody on my team, including me, has done that. I think there's some things we need to do to the setup. So it's annoying when you're fantastically slow. But we ran the whole time. Everyone had fun. No one got hurt. So it's hard to complain.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
But next time, taking scalps, I'm gonna win.
I mean, you're doing it for the fun at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean,
but we're so competitive that you don't want to.
yeah, it's sort of the downside, right? You always race, and you're just like, I gotta win. And so it's really disappointing. Well, it's disappointing when you don't.
Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking to be as far down as we were. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely that sweet spot of in a lot of things where you can have almost like the most fun per almost like effort put in. Like if you're taking it too seriously and you're not winning, then you're going to be upset.
Yeah.
But if you're like not taking it serious at all and you're still not winning, which,
Right.
it wouldn't be surprising, then you're still having a lot of fun. But being in the back, maybe you're not even competing or something. Like that's where it might get a little not as fun. But
Yeah, just get up there a little bit, and I think it'll be even better. But I mean, right now it's the funds per dollar is pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. 50cc Honda bikes can go a full 2 hours without filling it with any more gas.
There you go.
Didn't even use a gallon. Those indoor car tracks are meant for their own tire longevity, so it certainly helps ours. And doesn't even really show any signs of wear.
There you go.
So really, the only cost really is registration. So
Yeah.
$60 for 3 people to run for 3 hours. Find me a better deal than that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, but I guess big news coming out. I guess
Huge news
for kind of for us, a lot of friend circle and all that kind of stuff, and I mean motorsports in general as well.
Yep.
But it kind of hits home for us. But this week we had got news of Oshkosh Defense purchasing Pratt Miller for $115 million.
Was that the price?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. So, based off speculation from, I think, the New York Times, Joe Rogan could have almost bought Pratt Miller with his Spotify money.
Yeah, basically.
That's sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of questions coming around with it. I mean, Pratt Miller did defense work, obviously. We both did some of that. But there's questions in the motorsports world of what's going to happen with Pratt Miller. Everybody knows them as building the Corvettes, the GTLM cars.
Yeah, they're kind of that guiding force behind that. I mean, GM might not, they don't advertise it as the Pratt Miller Corvette, but I know a lot of the IMSA announcers, a lot of times they'll call it the Pratt Miller Corvette, probably against the wishes of GM. But,
I think so.
Those are the people, those are the boots on the ground, are the Pratt Miller guys. And, they've done all the work building, running the cars over the last, I don't know, since the C5R, right?
Yeah. C5R was the the big name, or when they got the big Corvette name, and they started doing more and more with GM.
Mm-hmm. I
And
guess,
that was kind of a gradual slope, right? Because back in the day, K-Tech used to make the engines. You know, now if you go look at the race car, that's actually made by GM. GM runs it and tests it on their dyno, and so GM's become more involved. So it's kind of hard to say like exactly when, you know, which car was the one.
yeah.
But
I guess, yeah, that was their kind of first big name program. I think before that there was some of the IMSA prototype stuff that they did. There's some Chevy or GM support, but yeah, that was kind of the big program that kind of vaulted them to start growing the company and kind of what it eventually became today.
Right.
But yeah, so, you know, race fans may recognize that name, Pratt Miller, but right now it's really in IMSA, they're kind of one of the last teams left in the GTLM class, with BMW, I believe, just doing the endurance rounds and Porsche pulling out. It potentially leaves that class kind of...
Well, it leaves that class open, you know, and then, I mean, we can, I guess, well, might as well just get into it now, but, you know, there's been rumors in the paddock about IMSA trying to merge GT3 with, the class is GTD, but they're GT3 cars, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to merge that GT3 car with GTLM, come out with something. You know, so the field's bigger and just...
Yeah, a lot more competition, but I'm sure... I mean, just speculating, I imagine that some pushback there would be having a factory program versus the customer programs is going to be, because that was already kind of I know there was a little bit of contention between the whole Honda, I believe the Honda GT3 cars, because it was at one point almost kind of a factory supported program, like they give them money towards the cars, is my understanding, and that kind of thing, but leaving GT3 is supposed to all be about customer racing programs, so so having a factory team like the Corvette racing team would be, you know, it could be a challenge to balance them out. But, you know, they have BOP.
Yeah, they have BOP. And there's some other series who adjust BOP based off of things like driver rankings. So they could do that too, potentially, if they wanted with, you know, okay, your manufacturer supported, where you get an extra, whatever they feel it's worth. You know, a smaller fuel restrictor for refilling or more weight, whatever they want to do, right? But
yeah, and they could always put some bronze and silvers in there too if they had to.
Yeah, they could force the driver rating.
Yeah, so but either way, I guess that announcement, it put it in a question for a lot of people when you combined it. I guess the future of the program, when you combine it with the other announcement that came out, that Doug Fehan was, I mean, depends on which one you read, was either stepping down or was forced out.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's confirmed either one, but, you know, he was the program manager of Corvette Racing, and so a lot of people are speculating with him leaving, with Pratt Miller being sold, like what does this mean for the race program? So yeah, so as a side note, to be clear, everything we're doing here is speculating. Yes.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely throws it up into question, right? Doug Fehan was a huge proponent of Corvette racing. He loved it, right? I mean, that was pretty obvious. So if he's not there, is someone gonna fight to have GM keep spending that money on Corvette racing? Because racing is not cheap, especially like the GTLM car, which, you know, we just kind of talked about. Maybe that class is disappearing, but when you get the manufacturers duking it out, that cost adds up pretty quick. So it does throw into question, you know, of are they gonna have the monies? You know, I do know that Mark Royce, he's moved around at GM. I'm not sure his official title right now, but he's a huge fan of racing.
Yeah.
And he's pretty high up in GM. You may recognize that name as he was the guy who sort of lost the new ZR1 pace car at the Detroit Belle Isle Grand Prix about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. They should check his tire pressures.
Yeah, they should.
They might
like
have been a
0.2 psi low or something. Yeah. But either way, he does believe a lot in the technology transfer that Fehan mentioned a lot. But he also sees that it's a bonus, or I guess a morale boost to GM employees in general. I don't know if you were still at Pratt at the time, but he came to one of our meetings, the summit. So the summit's where we all get together, all the management, every employee, and have a big little powwow meeting.
I used to call them the free food meetings.
Yeah, they fed us lunch, and it was actually really good food.
Yeah, it usually was. They didn't disappoint there.
Yeah, they didn't let us down, for sure. So that was the highlight of Brian's. He can tell what he cares about.
Yeah, no. If there was a big meeting, my first question would be, is there lunch? If not, then maybe I'd question, because there's a lot of good places to eat in New Hudson, Michigan, and or at least outside of it. And it definitely takes some free food to get me away from those places. Yeah,
well, I mean, and actually, you did have a lot of work generally, so it's like I can not go to a meeting and get some stuff done, but
yeah,
good free food. That's hard to argue with. but anyways, Mark Royce was telling us about the morale boost. Especially around a little after 2008. When they had the transition to like new GM, right? You could look out there and see Corvettes winning races, which is pretty sweet. Right? That's your team.
Everyone likes
your guys.
Likes a team to root for, and if it's
it's them.
For people that work there.
GM,
it was GM,
Chevy. So maybe he'll be a driving force to keep it going. I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah,
but losing Fehan, I think, is certainly a risk.
Yeah. Yeah, then whenever you lose that kind of continuity between, there's always going to be some information loss. So it's whoever comes in to replace him is gonna might have different ideas for the program or just the future of it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I mean, because you also have Oshkosh taking over Pratt Miller. So how are they going to be, how open are they going to be to that racing program?
Right. Yeah. I don't know the legalities of it, but would Oshkosh have to deal with GM to get a racing contract? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, Oshkosh, I guess for those who don't know, Oshkosh Defense, they do military contracts. I think the biggest one they're known for right now is JLTV.
Yep.
So that's the replacement for the Humvee.
Yep.
And
those
so
awesome. Yeah. And absolutely massive.
Yeah, huge. I mean, if you think a Hummer's big.
Yeah, it's a peanut compared to the JLTV.
Yeah. But and those things are sweet. But but they're not known for racing in any way whatsoever, as far as I know.
Right.
Looking into it, my understanding is the CEO has a little bit of, he does some motorsports on the side, but I mean, ultimately it's a publicly traded company. I mean, he's got to do what the shareholders want. So if for them Corvette racing isn't worth it, then, or any other racing programs, they only support IndyCar and NASCAR, and so it'll depend. Maybe some of those programs stay, some go. It's just, but it's now potentially a little bit out of Pratt Miller's hands,
right,
and a little more in Oshkosh's hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a shame, like when you have someone high up who likes racing, it's always good, right? Or at least if you're a racing fan, it's good, but that is the downside of a publicly traded company, is you are accountable to your shareholders and generally a board, and if they don't think there's work, I guess a positive return more than your feel goods, more than you like watching racing.
Yeah.
It may not happen. Which is also, I don't know, I guess it might be a little disappointing in all racing fronts, because I often at least thought to myself that, what if GM one day is like, nah, we don't really want to race, right? Racing is very fickle, super, super unstable. So it wouldn't be a huge surprise. Disappointing, but, no one stays in racing for that long generally. I think GM and Pratt Miller have the longest connection out of any race group, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But, generally when I would think about what if GM didn't want to do it, my go-to would be like, well, Pratt Miller is a good team.
Mm-hmm.
Good designers, good everybody, really. Good pit crew, Dan Bink's retired, but he's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Really everyone there is talented, so my thought always was another manufacturer would pick them up. Right?
Yeah.
If GM told Pratt Miller they were done, I would assume there'd be a line.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, look, Ford wants to get back into racing. Or,
yeah, someone.
Maybe Porsche owns 51% of Manti, but hey, Pratt Miller's free.
Yeah,
right?
Because Core was basically doing their North America GT stuff, Core Autosport, I believe. So yeah, like companies like that were doing other people's programs. Now Pratt Miller with all that history and success, they would look pretty. They'd be high on the list of people of manufacturers, like say like Hyundai or something wants to get into
right.
IMSA. Or like, who knows? It could be someone who hasn't been there. Like, well, now these guys are available.
Yeah, that would be the team to talk to, really.
Yeah.
But if the manufacturers have to deal with Oshkosh, which again I don't really know if they would. I'm just assuming they will. That might sort of throw a wrench into that line of thinking.
Yeah, it's because it depends on which way they go. I mean, because a contract is a contract. Just because you're making a race car or a tank, or ultimately, I mean, it's because someone's giving you money and you're making something for them. So I think maybe as speculating, maybe in the future, I mean, there's a lot of really smart guys in the Corvette design, Pratt Miller Corvette design office.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they want to allocate those guys to more lucrative programs or something like that. So that could be maybe where that starts to kind of there could start to be problems for wanting that contract versus something else that may be more profitable or something.
Sure.
So, but as of now, our understanding is, at least for this next season, it sounds like they're still full steam ahead. I was looking at their Facebook page when they made the announcement, and the comments from the Facebook page manager, which I imagine is I believe I know who it is, from working there, but they were responding that they're still planning on Daytona and everything. So as far as like the official outlets, it looks like at least for next season they're still going forward. I don't know what that means for Le Mans or anything like that, but as far as IMSA and Daytona,
right. Yeah, I mean, COVID really kind of screwed with Le Mans, but
yeah,
I certainly believe that they'll run that car as long as they can,
mm-hmm.
right? So outside of the aforementioned, maybe blend of GTD and GTLM, I mean, GM spent a pretty penny on those cars, and I mean, a lot of that comes into like engineering and testing, and
yeah,
that's all done. Like the big upfront cost is paid for, so I would imagine they'll run it for as long as they can. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I mean, and there could be some other opportunities too. I mean, you got the new hypercar class. I mean, the car would have to be changed, but there's other opportunities for GM to look at other classes and everything for maybe more competition or.
Yeah, that would be cool, right? Porsche's they're going to make a LMDH car, which is that hypercar class you just mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, and so so there's opportunities there. Like you don't know what the future holds, but and like you said, that racing programs, they can be very fickle. It's, they can just decide that this isn't the year for us to keep doing this, or and then but maybe they come back, maybe they it's just, but we're not sure. So as far as we can tell, they'll still be racing in the short term. So, but it brings into question long term what's going to happen with them, because like you said, I believe that's probably one of the longest continuous racing like factory supported racing programs in the business right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe only rivaled by like Formula One programs like Ferrari, or I imagine
but that's all like in-house, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. So as far as a kind of a contracted out racing program, I can't think of really any others like that. So it's I mean, hopefully they keep it together. We all love watching those Corvettes and really any racing. So
it'd be nice to see them keep going. And I mean, you can't predict the future, so I guess just roll with the punches. They're all talented people, so I'm sure it'll work out great.
Yeah,
but it'll be interesting to see where things go.
Yeah. So I mean, having worked a bit on the defense side of the company, it does seem like it's where they want to be going. Kind of, they've always wanted to do larger scale defense type programs and everything. So this might be the avenue for that. But yeah, so we'll have to see what happens with the racing. But the company really revolves around the racing program. So I think it would be hard, at least in the short term, to just kind of get rid of it and expect people to be happy there and everything. So
yeah, that would be difficult.
So yeah.
But speaking of fast Corvettes,
move
on down to our amateur racing side.
Yeah.
Bill Riley.
Yeah. So those of you who might be ChampCar racers among our listener base,
all two of our listener base.
If you've been racing ChampCar over this last year, you might have seen a very fast Corvette driving around and whooping some butts. The one that comes to mind the most is I believe it was 11 lap win at Indy. And it's got a big name like Bill Riley behind it. You expect them to be competitive. I mean, they have in the past. They previously had a Camaro that was very, very fast, but lacked the fuel range, and it relied heavily on getting those cautions to finish well. But it still would finish well. It had some reliability problems sometimes, but their new car has caused quite a stir in the ChampCar community and kind of in the amateur racing community, because a lot of people do different, race in different series, AR, WRL, ChampCar Lemons, whatever. So there's a lot of people who are paying attention to it. I know a lot of people on that ChampCar Facebook page,
get all riled up.
They might not even race ChampCar and get riled up, or maybe they want to in the future or something, or they just like to follow it. But yeah, it can be controversial when someone gets beat that bad. I mean, I don't always. Some people like to just immediately go, "Oh, they're cheating" or something like that. But I don't think that's always the case. I don't think that's the case here either. But I was at that Indianapolis race, fortunately in a much slower car, and not having as good as luck as they did. But right. I got to go. I got to go to the impound and really check out the car. I took some pictures, really got a good eye on it, and yeah, it's got definitely has some controversial parts on it. More, I guess, kind of the main controversy isn't just how fast they are, or the name behind it, or anything. It's more some people feel that there was some concessions made specifically for them for some of the mods they did to the car. So I think the one that comes to mind first is, so the car is I believe a 78 C3 Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a C4 rear suspension on it. Now, kind of a couple notable things with that change where you think, oh, I mean, you know, I'm sure it's C4, it's updated, it's better. But one thing I was recently made aware of is that the C3 uses, I believe it's, I guess, structural, or not sprung, but uses structural half shafts in the rear suspension.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
Yes. So, and yeah, it's got some goofy stuff going on. That suspension is definitely, it was carried over kind of over the years from, I believe, some of the previous. So it's got some weird quirks, mostly being that kind of structural loaded drive shaft. So I mean, I'm sure it worked okay in the stock, you know, in the original car. I don't know. I don't know what the
back in the 70s
the recalls were on that or anything, or if there's customer complaints. But I think where the interesting part of that is when you put the giant wheels and tires like they did. They're running 335 wide BFG Rival S's front and rear. When you put those giant tires on there and up the horsepower by double or so, and put it on a racetrack where you're hitting curbs and everything, like how well would that original suspension have held up?
Yeah.
So I guess but the most controversial part of this whole swap was that it was allowed at just a flat 50 points. So if you're familiar with ChampCar's point system, all cars have a base value, and then from there you can add mods basically up to 500 points where you start getting penalty laps. And so 50 points for that entire swap, including the diff, the half shafts, all the suspension arms, the shock, and that assembly. So all that for 50 points is quite a bit, when it wasn't specifically in the rule book, but normally, or you know, that 50 point swap wasn't, but how I guess most people expect it to be valued is each part basically individually. A diff is 25 points, each suspension member is 10. So when you add all those up, you'd be much more than 50 points there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess another thing with this car is that it started at, I believe, 150 points, so it's already really low. But I mean, you take a C3 off the road from the 70s and throw it on a racetrack.
Yeah, that's about where I'd expect it to be, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think Miatas would still be faster than it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's heavy. It's, you know, the suspension's pretty old fashioned, and you know,
Yep.
and the reliability would probably be questionable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and how much power did it make in 1978?
It's like 200 something, 220 or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's not like it's
It's not crazy.
It's not a crazy amount of horsepower. It's carbureted, so the fuel economy is going to be terrible. So you know, there's going to be a lot of things kind of going against it. That I think that starting value maybe is a little too low, but like it's not completely unreasonable. But really, what Bill Riley did, and the car's running under the name the good, bad, and the ugly, but it shows up in the Riley hauler. But what they did is they took that car and they really, I mean, they kind of exploited some loopholes that they were always there, and everyone who maybe is around the series a lot has always dreamed of maybe building a car like this, but they went and did it. And so on top of the kind of interesting rule, like I guess, I mean, everything they did, they asked the technical inspectors about if they could do, and these are the values they got. They didn't make anything up or lie or anything. It's just, this is what ChampCar decided to value this car at, and plus with that rear suspension swap. But then everything else they did a lot of engine mods, cylinder heads, cam, went to kind of a throttle body fuel injection setup, intake manifold. Mm-hmm. So things making some power. I put in the range of like 350 to 400 wheel is what I've heard. It's a lot for a champ car. I mean,
yeah,
most of them, like if an E30 BMW makes 160 horsepower, people start, you know, getting angry or something. Like they think they're cheating. So, you know, for a car to show up with almost 400 potentially.
A wheel, you said.
Wheel,
too.
yes. Yeah. It's quite a bit. I mean, but you think, oh, but it's really heavy. It's a big muscle car. But I mean, the car's all fiberglass body panels, so they're just taking. I don't know what the square footage of the parts they added, but they only took exactly the amount to put them to 500 points. So yeah, that's interesting. Maybe they could have easily calculated out and made sure they used exactly what they had left basically to make the wide body kit. But the wide body kit allows them to run big tires. But basically they added, it's all fiberglass panels. They took out everything they didn't need, and it's a chop top, so no more roof, and just a Lexan polycarbonate windshield. So my understanding is the car is right around 2,700 pounds, 2,800 pounds. So
well, that's pretty good.
You got that plus 4 horsepower. It's going to be a fast car. You put on 335 wide tires, and it's going to be able to handle that power to weight and everything.
Yeah.
And
so I've heard other people complaining about some ancillary items too.
Yeah.
I was hoping you can tell me about that. For some reason, I think this just goes to speak really for how fantastic of a, crowdsourcing ideas place Facebook is. There was a lot of talk about an alternator bracket. I realize that's one very small part of an entire car, but people were going off, it's billet, it's whatever. Did you see a lot of extra shiny bits on there that should have accounted for points just for material, or was that sort of a one-off and like whatever? What'd you notice? What do you think?
Yeah, so the alternator bracket was one. It wasn't just the bracket, but the alternator itself as well was a Bosch Motorsport alternator.
Okay.
Which I believe retails for around $500. So I mean, yeah, it's an alternator. It's not gonna win you the race, but it could offer you some more reliability. But the part that's, I guess, that people are most upset about is it wasn't claimed. There's nothing in the rules that says an alternator is this many points, but there's also a rule that says if it's not on this list, then it has to be some amount of points. Like there's no free parts. And then that bracket to mount it is also aftermarket or custom machined, so there's no points being taken there. And there, I think there were a few more things. There was, there was the mounting of the rear suspension was all adjustable. They had multiple holes to be able to basically change. They could kind of change that. What would it be? Like the instant center, so they can move so I guess in the
like the inboard side of the control arms.
Yes. So
the instant centers and the roll centers will change.
So they could update that, but their reasoning there is, that's all part of the suspension swap. We need brackets to mount our suspension to, but what the ones they made were these really nice machined and TIG welded brackets that they welded to the original body on frame setup. And then there was to hang those nice fiberglass body panels. There was nice TIG welded parts, tubes and everything coming off of the body. And there is a specific rule in ChampCar that says like, no, those would either be points or just make the car not allowed, because they don't want this kind of like hanging body panels on like a tube frame kind of deal.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and then another area that was very controversial was they had 2 tubes go through the firewall, which is allowed, but they basically mounted in to the front suspension pickup points, and then were mounted to the cage. And they took this as a 10-point strut tower bar, but I mean it was like a full tubular structure that went into the engine bay, tied in the front suspension, mounted a few things, like I think the radiator might have been mounted to it and everything, but then also tied that suspension into the main structure of the roll cage. And I mean, by the letter of the rule, I guess you could say, like, what is a strut? I mean, a strut tower bar, you kind of need struts, and it doesn't have struts. It's a double wishbone car, so there's that. But like, maybe you could say it's bar, and they were claiming it, but ultimately ChampCar actually agreed with some of these complaints. Like the alternator bracket was added on as points the second day at Indy, which for most teams would mean you'd be DQ'd from the previous race, because if you're caught with any unclaimed parts, that should be a DQ. Now the ChampCar officials, I believe, argued this was more of a since it was more their fault for not valuing the parts themselves and not giving proper value to things, that it's more in their fault, and the team shouldn't be punished. But I mean, we've seen teams. There's a race at Gingerman recently where the team had an unclaimed stroker engine. Now, I mean, there's no engine internals aren't really in. I guess there's not specifically any rules to allow you to change them, and for that reason, you're not allowed to change them. But it's hard to enforce in some cases. If you make any internal changes, it's hard to it would require you to tear down the engine. It's not always feasible in this kind of, amateur endurance racing. I mean, like it's hard to.
It's not a great environment to do that in, right? Everybody's tired and wants to go home after a long weekend. Nobody wants to pull an engine and disassemble it.
And like the stakes are like you get some money towards racing with ChampCar, basically. You get credits, and like, so for a lot of people it might not be worth it, because maybe you have to replace the head gasket maybe when you take it off, or head bolts, their torque to yield, that kind of stuff. Like there could be some costs associated with having to do that. And so a lot of people might not want to in that case. But basically there was a team that they found it was a stroke engine. They DQ'd him and put him in the EC the next day. Whereas in this case, although they weren't trying to hide anything, it was right out there in the open, it was still an unclaimed part. And so they were DQ'd, and they got to race in the normal classes the next day. I guess a better example of this was at one of the championships. I think it was the Eastern Region Championship a couple years ago. Is at AMP at Atlanta Motorsports Park, and there's a team that I can't remember where they finished. It was like second or third or something, but they had a rear anti-roll bar that was aftermarket that they had forgotten to claim on their sheet. They were under the points, so like the car was at like 470 points, so they could have taken the 25 to add that sway bar, but they just forgot to claim it in their logbook and on their tech sheet. And when this was found, they were actually DQ'd.
That seems kind of shitty to me.
Exactly. So it's kind of a similar thing where either they forgot, or air quotes forgot to claim something, but it still kept them under 500 points. Now it's a hard sometimes, because if you let other teams get away with it and they were trying to hide it, then it could be a slippery slope in that way. But in this case, I mean, it should be looked at case by case. I think the car would still have been under 500 points. So there shouldn't have been an advantage. There was no extra penalty laps that should have needed to be added, but they got DQ'd. And then in this case, with the good, bad, and the ugly Corvette, it wasn't DQ'd, and it was allowed to race the next day with now both the extra laps from winning by like 11 laps or so, plus with the laps they added for being over 500 points now. But it's not the best take when people have been DQ'd in the past for either forgetting or not knowing a part required points, and then this team not having that same treatment. Sure.
So my understanding is after that, though, they had their car undergo like a full inspection so that ChampCar could claim every single thing they wanted to add points to. Is that about right?
My understanding was actually they had ChampCar come to their shop before that race that they won at some point. I don't know if it was when it was originally built, but yeah, they had ChampCar come and they checked it themselves. I believe Jay, the lead tech person, went there and he deemed it okay. So I don't think I think there might have been a separate audit afterwards before their next events, but but so I wouldn't necessarily blame, you know, Bill Riley or that whole team for bringing that car and in what it was like, and not expecting it to be any extra points or anything, because as far as they went through the proper channels, they went to ChampCar, they got it, you know, specifically inspected in their shop, and
I mean that all seems pretty reasonable and thorough.
Yeah, so but the end result is a car, so you know that, you know, 2,700 or so pounds, 400 horsepower or so, give or take, 26 gallons of fuel max potential on board, and
Right.
and with giant 335 tires that, you know, I think at Indy was about 8 seconds faster than the next fastest car, which was probably a second or two faster than the third fastest. So like it starts to snowball quickly when you look at like someone, the guy in like 20th place or something, and he's going to be like 15 seconds a lap slower.
Right. Yeah, that's a
And
lot.
That's a lot of time. And in some cases they were able to go 2 hours on fuel, which is very important in ChampCar with the minimum 2-hour driver stint. So ended up a car with definitely a major overdog. But I guess the question that a lot of people were asking is it just because Riley Motorsports is, you know, they're a professional racing team, and they built a really good car and they drove it well and they ran it well, and or is it because they got maybe some preferential treatment from ChampCar alongside with a rule set that just didn't keep up with what they were building, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds more like they found a loophole in the rules rather than something else.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as far as loopholes, I mean, ChampCar has made some changes since, so the points next year are the base starting points are increased from 150 to 300. So that's a big change
So
there.
no cars, or just the Corvette.
The C3 specifically.
Okay. Okay.
So it has more points now, so there's potentially parts they're going to have to take off to stay with under 500. And then I believe they're reversing their ruling on the 50-point rear suspension swap. So that's going to be a lot more points. So potentially they have to take off a lot of those power adders that they had on there, because it was 100 points for the cylinder head, 50 points I think for the intake manifold, maybe 20. Maybe I think it's 25 for the intake manifold, 25 for the throttle body injection. So like and the cam I think is 100 points, or maybe 50 or 75. I can't remember, but basically it brings them to the point where maybe they have to take those heads off, take the cam out of there, get rid of the throttle body injection and stuff. And maybe if the car's running in the 250 to 300 horsepower, it'll be kind of in a better spot compared to a lot of their cars. But I guess we'll just have to see which mods they choose to take off. Maybe they take off those fiberglass wide body and make something out of wood or something. Yeah, something that's less.
Run a little smaller tire too.
That too, and that would drop some weight, so it would have some benefits. So we'll have to see what they come up with, but I think overall it left kind of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, at least at the front of ChampCar, and maybe all throughout, because I mean you got the guys showing up maybe it's their first race, they're having fun, they bring a mostly stock Miata or something, and they see that thing blow by them.
Their doors blown off.
Yeah, like, you know, with 40-50 mile an hour difference in speed down the straight, like, you know, you can't really compete with that, and maybe it demoralizes them. Thinks like, oh, we want to eventually progress this car up towards the front, but like you get blown off by that, and you're like,
there's nothing you can do.
I don't know what we can do. And I know there were a few teams that, specifically, I think it was Parts Badger. They have a very fast Miata. They were talking about, like, you know, all the stuff they'd have to do to try to keep up with them. That they might just take a break from ChampCar, and so there's been some repercussions of this whole situation. I think a question a lot of people might be asking ChampCar is like, for what gain, to give them, allow them to run at those points and all that kind of stuff. There's many things they could do within reason to maybe just that weekend, or in the grand scheme of things, to kind of calm everyone down. But like, what was the benefit from this? Like, why having Riley run that car? Did they think it would make people, because, you know, there's some pro race teams that race at ChampCar. There's Salins, or pro or former pro teams. There's Salins, there's, I think, like the Turner Motorsports guys, they don't come under their name, but they field, at least help out or drive cars, I believe. So
Sure.
there's some big names out there, and it's great to, as a amateur team, to race against those guys.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a cool experience. I mean, yeah, they bring some fancy tools and big haulers and all that stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna be any faster. It's just they're gonna look way better doing it, or or just it it. I don't know. I think that lends some credibility to what people are doing in ChampCar or any of the amateur racing. Like, if they're able to compete with these guys, they feel like they're racing against some well-known names, some people that have a lot of experience and history in motorsports. So, I mean, I don't want to, like, I wouldn't want them to make a big change that basically just kicks out the Riley team and then they can't race with us.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just strange. Like, I think maybe they thought that people would see that car and just I don't know, want to go to the race just to see it. Like, I don't know. Like, it's a very cool car. Like, it's got a lot of details like that are really nice. It's got really nice race tech seat mounted to the cage with a Tilton pedal box that slides, and then
Okay. Yeah.
and just Motec data system and all that stuff. Like, all that stuff that you
The
can
nice
do.
parts.
Yeah, like, what you'd expect in a full-on GTD car or something. I mean, we kind of talked about it with the GT4 Supra. It's similar parts that you might see in that.
Fancy parts.
So it's cool to see, and that that none of that stuff. Some of that stuff might not really make a car faster. It's more comfortable and makes it nicer for the driver, and they have more data to go off of. And all that stuff's allowed within the rules. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. They understand it. They might have spent a lot of money on it. I mean, there are race teams, so a lot of this could just kind of be leftover stuff from the race cars.
Right.
But ultimately, it's more of the overall the performance of the car that I think is difficult for people to accept. Since, I mean, you're with ChampCar's championship race being at Road America, and them being qualified for it at the front, it's going to be really hard to beat that car.
Yeah, it seems like that thing would just walk away.
You basically just hope that it, maybe not hope, but if you want to be able to compete with it, you're going to have to expect it to have some sort of mechanical issue.
Right.
Which in the past they did, but it seems like now they've developed the car to the point where it's quite reliable most of the time. And yeah, it's just gonna be hard for them to compete, and that could really deter some people from wanting to come in that race if their sole goal is to try to win that championship, knowing that their chances have now basically reduced to a coin flip of whether the team breaks down or not. Then, that might not be a good enough chance for people. So, I think, I mean, there's been a lot of shakeups in ChampCar. Mike Chiswick stepped down as CEO, and now we have Dana Morrison taking over. So there's some changes in the management and leadership at ChampCar. So we'll see how they look at stuff.
Yeah.
In the future.
I did see a few people who are on the side of run what you brung and build a better car. Generally, that's the camp I'm in. I'm a big fan of that, right? A lot of what I think makes a car good outside of driver mod is having like a all-around cohesive approach to it, right? One fast, cool bit on it's not going to work that well unless it works with everything else. So generally, that's my attitude. But I think just maybe as a paradigm shift, or a fun thought experiment. I have a first gen CTSV. Right? But I like it. It's cool. I feel like if I showed up to a ChampCar race with it, I'd be flayed alive.
Yeah.
Nobody would be putting up with it.
Yeah.
It's 4,000 pounds. In 2004, it had 400 crank horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
245s all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you want more than 275s, you're going to have to change links in the rear suspension. More than that's probably not going to change or fit in the front, even with pulled and rolled fenders. And somewhere between 16 and 17 gallons fuel capacity. So, by a decent margin, my car is lacking in every single one of those specs compared to this Corvette.
Yeah, and
I find it strange that I think the same people who are saying build a better car would also be very upset with me if I showed up with a CTS-V.
yeah, I mean, to put it in context, a CTS V6 is, I believe, 500 points before you even like change anything. So, this thing would be, if they gave it a value, I don't think it's even on the list, but if they gave it a value, you'd expect it to be in like the 700 points or something, because it's got an LS.
Yep.
And 400 horsepower. I mean, when you gut it, maybe you could get it down to 3,000. I mean,
maybe that's a lot of weight. It's definitely not getting to 2,700, right?
No, definitely not.
3,000 is a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to gut every piece of whole saw as much as you could.
Yeah, smoky unit, acid dip it 12 times or whatever.
Make sure all the windows are either gone or replaced with polycarbonate and just you would have to go full on Swiss cheese on that thing, and maybe you could get it to 3,000. But it'll just eventually be a limitation of if it's just gonna like break in half if you take too much weight out.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I mean, the first gen CTS-Vs aren't known for the most reliable rear diffs, so you'd be contending with that. I mean,
and that it's a little weird to say because you see a lot of T56s and fast drag cars, but they're not supposedly not that great for road racing. Seen quite a few people track these cars. The previous owner tracked my car a lot. Seems to be okay. But talking to the people who were on the Cadillac CTS race team and back in the day, and again, sort of just going back to we worked at Pratt, right?
Yeah,
they had to keep that thing reliable enough to finish a race, right? Not have it as a question in someone's mind. They had to rebuild that diff and transmission after every event.
Yeah,
so you're contending with that.
And that was sprint racing.
That's sprint racing, and that's completely ignoring, the possibility of maybe someone using stronger gears and carbon clutches and however they make them, carbon synchros, not what. What's in it. So it's strange.
Yeah. So I mean,
the discrepancy is strange.
Yes. So it'd be very obvious. People would just be like, "There's no way this thing should be under 500 points." And I think, when you look at the numbers and compare it to that Corvette, it's just it is a loophole car, but it's almost like in some cases some loopholes were made for them, and that's not going to make anyone happy. Who wants to come up there and bring their car that's right at 500 points, but can't even touch that level of performance, no matter if they put Lewis Hamilton in the car or something,
right?
So. Yeah, because there's been a lot of discussions over the years on the ChampCar forums and stuff that I've participated in, about certain teams. It's like people are like, oh, well, they just have really good drivers, or they put together and manage and maintain a really good car. But I think this is a case where you have very good drivers and a very good team maintaining a car that is outside of what is kind of expected in the ChampCar rules. So I don't want to discount it. It is a very good team with some really, really good guys behind it and really smart guys, and it seems to be driven pretty well. But you put those same people in a front running Miata or E30 or SC300 or whichever is the flavor of the month. I don't think anyone will get anywhere close to the times they're doing. So I think it's okay to. I mean, sometimes loophole cars pop up, and it does seem to be they made some adjustments to it, but I guess we'll just have to see how they adapt to those adjustments, because, like we said, they're smart guys. They might be able to find some things, maybe take advantage of more things they weren't before, because they didn't really need to. The car was already super fast.
Yeah.
Now they can look into other areas that they were kind of neglecting because it was good. It was already good enough. So there's still opportunities for them to be, I'm sure, very quick. But hopefully it'll bring them more in line with a lot of the performance of a lot of other cars out there.
Yeah. Where do you see that upper limit of ChampCar being? Like, do you think the rules should stay where they are and that's about it? Or, as cars made now, or, even in 2015, in a few years, they'll be old enough to be maybe on the rule set. Maybe they're faster, or maybe you can make them faster. Speed creep is always a thing. That's the nature of it, right? We are competing to go faster.
Yeah, and even if
so, everybody will go faster.
And even if we don't even do anything to make our cars better, eventually better tires come out. Like, things just will improve. And just think, every time I go to the track as a driver, I feel like I get a little bit better. And if you've been racing for now 5 years, 10 years, you take that same car you built 10 years ago and drive it now, you'd probably be a lot faster. So
yeah,
everyone's always going to get quicker. But yeah, like you said, having new cars, as old cars become less and less available, it might be hard to get an 80s BMW or something like that. It might appeal to more people to keep bringing more and more new cars like FRS or
ND
Miata. Like a lot of these newer cars, or even just like a newer 3 Series or something. But these cars keep getting more and more power, more and more, sophisticated ABS systems and traction control and that kind of stuff that could make the car faster than the numbers suggest.
Yeah.
But I think it seems like they're moving towards, they haven't made any large moves, but I think what they'll should do maybe is, start to maybe slowly lower the points of the older cars to allow them more and more updates to then allow newer cars to come in. Because some people I think would rather race a new car that they don't have to rub or grind all the rust off of, or whatever, or can go to the local parts store and easily find stuff for it, or the dealership or whatever. So
do you think it sounds like you're okay with speed creep? If that's right, are you concerned at all, or is it more of a rate for you? Maybe a % or 2 faster lap time per year. You don't want to see any big jumps, or just where do you see that upper limit being?
Yeah, I think that would be like having a couple %. Like, I think it depends on the track, but if you look over many years, some tracks won't have that many big changes in lap time, like the fastest lap. But that can be highly dependent on what teams show up to certain tracks, which cars that are maybe suited for some tracks versus another. But overall, yeah, I think a certain % every year would be okay. I think in the case of this, the good, bad, and the ugly Corvette, there was a speed leap, as people like to say, where it was such a big jump. I mean, we're talking like every track, 6 to 8 seconds a lap.
Yeah.
Like, no one's going to be able to develop their car in 1 year without really adding adding a turbo or something to their car or whatever, like without adding a ton of power or somehow finding a bunch of weight or running a racing slick or something. I don't think anyone can just develop that much time into the car over the course of a year. So I think it's definitely good maybe it could be useful, like for ChampCar to kind of have this long-term goal of almost like average lap time over all their events, and if there's anything that goes above that line of a couple percent or two per year, then they need to look at who's doing that dip and see if that car needs to be adjusted or something, or if
Sure.
specific part values or something need to be changed. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But overall, I think they're kind of in the right direction. I just think, yeah, you got to be careful with the kind of loophole cars. You got to handle them without really upsetting too many people. But then also, I think overall, I mean, I like going faster every year. I like just going faster in general. And I think there's a lot of people that like rules that allow them to bolt fancy things on their car, because a lot of people like to do that. So, but not everyone can afford to do that. That's where you kind of have to draw that line.
I mean, so I guess another question then is, do you need to draw that line? And what I'm getting at is, racing is expensive.
Yeah.
Phenomenally expensive. Even amateur racing, right? I mean, if you signed up with a competitive team, and you were renting a seat, let's say you're going to VIR, the full course. You know, I guess right now you can only do it in the 24, but whatever. You can pretend it's an 8-hour race if you want. Or 2 8-hours. How much would that cost you for the weekend, do you think? And I mean you. To get there, you know, lodging, food, seat rental, and a competitive car, how much do you think that would cost?
Yeah, I mean, that would probably put you, depending on the team and their budget, or their running costs, everything. I mean, it could be anywhere from $1,200 to maybe even $3,000 on the upper end, if you're including your hotel, your driving, or your plane ticket, if you're just doing fly-in, ride and drive kind of stuff. But
yeah, so if we said $2,000 for the weekend, right? That would be like a $1,200 seat, couple nights in a hotel, plane ticket, and meals for everything in between. $2,000 isn't in a weekend. So
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot more than, like, I think probably average people can do, or at least consistently do.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Someone can save money and go race one weekend for the whole year, but I think it's not cheap. So understanding racing isn't cheap. Are you that concerned if it goes up and if that would now cost you $2,500?
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot more money that you'd rather not spend. But
Yeah, I think. I mean, yeah. Me personally, I love racing, so I'll find a way.
Yeah.
But for the people that, I think it's not as much of a problem for maybe the people, the most competitive teams up there that are competing. I think they're willing to make the adjustments most of the time. Most of the people. I don't want to just talk for everyone, but I think the area that I think most, I feel like I see the most complaints about is, like, if you change this rule, allow this part for free or something, now I have to buy that to be competitive. Now, it depends, like, because it's not really changing the cost of you showing up and racing there. I mean, the only things that can really change that are entry fee, gas prices, that kind of stuff. As far as you going to that event and racing in a race, whether you're competitive or not, that's a whole nother story. So,
right.
As long as, and honestly, that's where I feel like we've seen costs go up in recent years, at least with ChampCar, is those entry fees are going up. I mean, it depends on how the economy's doing and how their strategy is and everything. Because at the end of the day, ChampCar is relatively unique because it's a nonprofit club. So they're more out to just make sure they could survive as a club and bring as many events as they can to as many tracks and people as possible. So it's not as much. I don't think they're price gouging or anything, but the price has been going up, and that does affect the minimum cost of entry. Now, to be competitive, if you feel like you need to now buy that shiny new part, that new flywheel or brake setup or whatever, and you can find some lap time out there, that does potentially effectively increase that cost. But I feel like for the teams that their only goal is to win, I feel like you need to be ready to spend, I guess, that kind of money. I mean, you could, instead of buying that shiny part, you could do a test day, extra test day, and burn up some tires and all that kind of stuff, and that would cost you as much. And honestly, in some ways, you might see more benefit from that than the shiny part. But
Right.
But still, if you add the shiny part and go testing, that could get you even more performance potentially. So I think there does have to be a balance. I think where I feel like more effort could be put into is more looking at the parts that could potentially lower the overall operating costs of the car, and maybe allowing more of those. I know one area that always comes up is radiators and oil coolers and stuff, because those are points, and they can definitely afford someone more performance. I mean, because reliability is performance. It's definitely one of the major, especially in endurance racing. It's a huge part of performance.
Yeah.
So I agree that I'm okay that it does have a point value, but there's some cars that would have to take penalty laps because they start at 500 just to add that. And if they're really serious, they're just going to say, screw it, I'm not going to run that oil cooler, and I'll just worry about replacing my engine every, maybe more often, because eventually my oil's breaking down in the middle of these longer races, and it's eating away at these bearings over time, and just causing failures in the long term or even short term. But I think there's some things that could be done, potentially allowing that, and a free oil cooler could allow people to maybe attend more races because their engines aren't broken down as often or having them replaced. But
yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at with the cost thing is, I mean, I could set a price and say that should be the target. Mm-hmm. That's incredibly selfish. Mm-hmm. Just in the nature that that target is based off of me, my lifestyle, what I do for, work, all of it. Yeah. Right. It'd be very self-centered. And then cheaper would be cool, I guess. But I guess I have a hard time, if I take a step back and try and view it from, this big picture thing where I'm not concerned with my personal budget. Mm-hmm. You're not really pulling in my heartstrings, right? If you say, oh no, I don't want to have to buy that, whatever it is, right? That shiny new part, that is dry brake for your fuel, which with the minimum fuel time in the pit, I don't think it helps, makes things safer.
Potentially, yeah. Definitely.
So I'm for it being allowed. But understanding that there's a lot of people who can't do this, like someone who can, and you don't want to spend a little bit more money. Like, I understand not wanting to spend it. You're just not generating any sympathy from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's because like I said, like, it's not really changing the minimum cost for you to show up to that event and have some fun racing.
Yeah.
And all the way up the field, there's people you can race. Maybe you're not getting the trophy at the end of the day, but you're still having a good time, making memories, that kind of thing.
I mean, there's a wide spread of lap times. There's going to be people close to you.
Yeah.
And there's some awesome teams that show up, and I don't know why they want to do it, but I'm thankful they do, and they just barbecue for everybody or bring a bunch of beer or whatever it is. Like, you can show up and race for 25th place and have a great time.
Yeah.
And
you definitely, I mean, you want to keep people wanting to come back, because that's what can lower those overall costs for everyone, is getting more people to sign up and getting car counts up, and that can lower the cost for everyone. But so it's definitely, you got to keep everyone in mind when you're making these changes. But I think for the most part, it shouldn't, because kind of what we've talked about before, the teams that can only afford to go to 1 or 2 races a year, I don't think, even if you gave them those fancy parts, because they're not doing it all season, doing all these races, getting better as drivers, as a team, developing the car, it's going to be hard for them to be competitive already, because they're not going to as many events. So at the same time, those people that are going to all the events, they're spending way more money just to go to the event. So do you prevent them from going to those events, or testing? Like Formula One prevents testing for cost reasons. Like, do you prevent them from taking their car to a track day? Like, these are arguments you can make if you're only worried about like cost for performance or something.
Sure.
It's just, those are kind of intangible things. It's not just a shiny part that everyone can buy.
And NASCAR limits wind tunnel time.
Yeah.
Not that anybody is putting their car in a wind tunnel, although not that nobody's doing it. But I mean, I guess it's a good point you made, is, you know, if you care about performance or dollar per performance, you're going to limit what they're doing outside of the race.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, man.
I mean, and I think the things that people have talked the most about, that I've seen in like the ChampCar community is because one other, I guess, kind of controversial thing with the good, bad, and the ugly cars, that they ran the tires they use, those 335 wide tires, are, I think they're, for a set, they're almost $2,000. I believe it's like $500 a tire, and then they change them multiple times during the race. So that's something where you are basically buying speed, because those tires are going to be faster than if you just had some 225 Hankook RS4s or something on the car.
Right.
Or even just in the same size, going from the Hankook to the RE71, Bridgestones. That's just kind of, well, free speed, as far as not having to develop the car really. You just you put on these new tires, but is expensive speed potentially that not everyone can afford. So I think,
but then where do you draw that line, right? So if you're looking at tires, you say, okay, right, we have to go down to like Miata tire sizes just to be able to compare all the different flavors. You say, okay, you can't use RE71s, or better yet, in this case, just because we're trying to draw a line or a comparison with the Corvette, you can use them, but you can't use 245s. 225 is the max. Okay. What's to stop you from running 225s, and they'll wear out sooner.
Yeah.
And you'll spend more money replacing them.
You just change them every pit stop time.
Yeah. I mean, you're still buying speed at that point.
Yes.
Or you say, okay, no RE71s. Yeah, all right, fine. So you go to the next tire and dial up your aero to get more vertical load in the tire. Right. If you're not, there's obviously a balance between aero and drag and power, but there's always a way out of it, I guess, is what I'm saying. So
yeah, if kind of, for some teams, if money isn't too big of a concern, that they're going to usually find a way. Yeah,
there's a way to spend money. Someone will take your money. So,
but I think there are ways that it could be limited. Some things that were talked about were changing the minimum pit stop time. So if there isn't a minimum pit stop time, or if it's shortened to the point where you can't change all 4 in one pit stop, that could then limit those guys. If you do some sort of limit on the tires, but also on the pit stops, then that makes them decide which thing is faster. And if you try to, I think it's
that. I'm sorry to interject, but that sounds more like you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you got rid of the minimum pit stop time, which on the surface I'm not against. Again, I like the racing. Rung what you brung. You know what? If your buddy's good at fucking changing tires. Let them do it, right? But if you're concerned about spending money,
Yeah.
and you can't just say, all right, well, if we drop the minimum pit stop time, these guys won't be able to do tires and fuel because they'll just have a fucking team out there changing their tires and they'll do fuel.
Yeah. So they'll still be able to look at what the best thing is for them in that case, and maybe
I'm just saying, like, they'll outspend you to the point where they can do everything at the pace you can do it because they just hired six guys.
So that they could find a way to fuel faster and still change those tires super fast. Yeah, I get that. I mean, there'll still be some sort of, I would hope that people, without having to spend too much money, can fuel their car relatively quickly, especially if they have less gallons on board than those guys do. But so there's definitely some time penalty for them doing that. But if honestly, if they're 8 seconds a lap faster, you might as well just change the tires. And so they'll be able to figure that out. So maybe overall they'd lose a little bit of speed, but I don't think it would do what everyone is hoping it to do potentially. I mean, I think there's maybe some possibilities for trying to limit the pit stops themselves, like the number of people over the wall, the number of wheel guns.
Yeah, those would help. You know, I don't think they have a good way to measure it, but this is coming off the top of my head here, but I think if you limited, rather than the whole pit stop time, you just limited time fueling. Had a minimum time there. Because then, you know, if you take tires, that's on top of your minimum time fueling.
Okay, yeah.
You know
so
what I mean?
Decide how much.
So your pit stop could have been shorter.
Okay.
You see what I'm
Yeah,
getting at there?
I get it.
That's how the Michelin Pilot Challenge in IMSA does it. Right? Because it's interesting because there's a bunch of different series, right? And some of them have fuel flow rates for the from the rig to the car. Some of them have fueling time. ChampCar obviously has like a time in pit.
Yeah.
But in my humble opinion, in terms of consistency and competitiveness, the time spent fueling is the best. Again, I don't know how ChampCar would do it. Well, it would measure it. But because it limits one specific, you know, sector that everybody's going to have to do, you're all going to be comparable there. Then if someone's taking more tires, that's extra time for them.
Yeah.
They can decide if it's worth it or not. You
know?
And then all of a sudden, so some teams have rigs with things to like make the fuel flow faster. Right? So they can fill sooner. But if you have that minimum fuel time, doesn't matter. Right? That's another thing around that.
Yeah.
You know, someone can be using, you know, there's no minimum pit stop time, but there's a minimum fuel time, and people can use Hunsikers, or they can use dry brakes, or they can use whatever the hell they want. There's a lot of ways to hit that minimum fuel time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But so I guess my counter argument towards that, I think that could be a good idea, but then basically you need, you know, ChampCar officials at almost every pit box, right?
Yeah,
watching
exactly.
that fuel
That's
time and timing
the
it.
Problem.
So it could be done, but then maybe if they can't find enough volunteers, because all the people in pit lane are usually volunteers. If you can't find that, then maybe they have to start paying people, and then everyone's costs go up, it's including the guy, you know, the minimum entry point.
Right. Yeah.
So
the person using those like EPA certified red gas tanks they got at, I don't know, Walmart.
Yeah, and you know, and showing up with their basically stock car that they just are running some old street car tires on or something. So like it potentially then harms everyone, and especially the guys, the minimum cost of entry for anyone. So then we kind of are going in a circle where we're maybe making it so you can't just outspend everyone to win, but then you're increasing the costs of the lowest, you know, the entry level people. So it's never going to be an easy solution.
Yes, it's not an easy answer for sure.
It requires definitely a lot of thinking, and it's something I honestly haven't been able to figure out. I think it requires a lot of people to come together and try to come up with something and agree to something. But yeah, I personally haven't, because you could limit the number of tires people bring to a race, but then now someone needs to mark all of those tires, maybe at the tech shed, but then all of a sudden that makes the tech shed line like 4 hours long at every race.
Right. Well, and then how closely can everybody monitor, like outside of people policing their neighbors?
Yeah.
Which nobody likes a narc.
But
yeah, how do you monitor, like someone has an extra set of RE71s just for the fronts in their Civic or whatever, right? They throw them on, you do 2 hours, they take them off, put them back in the trailer.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here's all the marked tires are out here on pit road. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, or like even like, because, you know, someone like Salins who brings 3 cars, they could be like, okay, let's take all of our tires from the other 2 teams that aren't, as we're just trying to have fun with those ones. And the serious one, you give them all, like, they're all marked. We got them marked. We're running a marked set, guys. You know, and unless you're like, you know, recording every pit stop they're doing, you're not going to be able to notice them doing that. So, but
yeah, no.
But then, yeah, okay, now you set up specific RFID tags for every tire like IMSA does, or
the way out of everything we've talked about is electronics, which can be cheap, but not in this case.
Yes.
RFID tags on the tires, plus you need to be reading them and monitoring them. You know, if you made everyone put fuel into a fuel cell, or not a fuel cell like you would normally think of in a car, but like a fuel rig, you know, giant jug. They could see when it's flowing. Yeah. But then someone has to own those jugs and all that electronic equipment.
Yes.
There's
yeah, because
there's
if you
any type of monitoring you're gonna do for whatever part of a car it is, whatever aspect, it's gonna add cost.
Yeah.
Because you need to pay for the equipment at a minimum.
Yeah. So now, as we said, now everyone's minimum cost goes up. And so now literally the cost of racing is increasing at that point. And okay, now, but it allows maybe people in the mid pack to be a little more competitive with the guys all the way up front that have all the money willing to spend it. But it could be at the expense of the, you know, mid to lower, you know, the people that are maybe just trying to do it for fun or very part-time. And so, yeah, it's very difficult to kind of balance those things. I think ultimately I feel like there just needs to be some kind of, you can't police them, but gentlemen's agreements. Like someone should have just talked to Riley and those guys and just be like, hey, maybe next time you don't show up with this many tires, or like, between you and me, kind of like, I don't know. It's hard to write rules for everything. There could be a way, but then you end up with, you know, needing a lawyer to go through the rules to like explain, explain like what has to be done, in order to make your car legal, or and then it makes it less fun. Maybe it makes going through tech harder. It makes the weekend just shorter for racing, or just hanging out with friends. You're just like in tech lines forever between every race or session or whatever, and they're impounding every car, or like, I don't know. I think people just, I don't know. I think the people at the front need to take it maybe just that tiny bit less seriously. I mean, these are
back.
You're racing for credits that obviously some of those teams at the front don't need, for trophies that are made out of scrap metal. And, you know, not to anyone who's won these trophies, not to make it's a big accomplishment to win any race, ChampCar or IMSA. Like, it's all takes a lot of execution, and
there's a lot of things that have to go into it.
Yeah, but you know, we're not on TV. We're not racing for $100,000 purses. And not even the pros are doing that. There's no unless it's Formula One, where you know the sixth place constructor versus the seventh gets an extra 10 million or something, and that could be between whether you can hire or keep some of your staff. Like none of this is happening here. It's just you know, you're getting your trophy and some credits but you know, people, I take my racing seriously, and I like to win, but yeah, it's just sometimes it can take the fun out of it when someone is taking you too seriously and has the money to do anything they want, basically.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough. I mean, you know, because I've raced for some competitive teams at ChampCar and had a lot of fun winning races.
It's fun to win.
It's definitely fun to win. Like it's very fun to win. But it's also fun to, you know, because when we raced the Volvo, our classy Volvo 960 wagon, chop top, now manual swapped.
Oh yeah.
It's, you know, the car was they got it for free, and you know, it's a very low budget build. In order to get more rear grip, we just welded the Eaton E90 or I can't remember the exact name, but the Eaton locker that's supposed to just lock up at below 20 miles an hour so you can get out of your driveway in your Volvo in the morning or whatever. We made it so now it just locks at any speed. So now we have a fancy locker on it, which, you know, basically just for the cost of some MIG gas and wire. Like, yeah, everything on that car has been done with a budget in mind.
Yeah.
And just we haven't won any races, and we led a race at VR by accident because we forgot to put a transponder on the car, and they gave us a few too many laps when they corrected it. But and it led one lap at Gingerman once because we started on pole, and at least I led the over the start finish line.
You guessed the number right, or the number he
rolled, the pit stall number was ours, and so so we got to start on pole by basically a dice roll.
So honestly. Volvo led 2 races. I know what I got. 19 grand or best offer.
Yes, but yeah, honestly, I've had more fun in that car in some chances, just in some cases where it's just sometimes we only get to do 1 race a year in it, but we go out there and we're a second or 2 seconds faster than we were last year. That in its own can be really fun. We're still, maybe the field's getting faster than that every year, but so we're kind of staying in the same spot, but it's still fun to try to stretch your dollar in a car, like trying to get most performance per dollar versus just most performance period.
Well, it's also nice to not be so incredibly worried about something, right? If you had a 25 grand build, holy shit, you don't want any contact, you know? At least most normal people wouldn't, right? And then sometimes it's just, you know, about company, right? So yeah, it's fun to, you know, miss shift, and then a Volvo with his middle finger sticking out the driver's side window passes you, and then he blows a damper and you pass him back and give him the finger again, and you know, I mean, these things are fun.
That was the first time I ever did full size kind of, you know, racing with your friends, like go-karts, but you're in actual cars on a racetrack.
Same attitude
though. Maybe a little less dive bombs and, you know, but and body damage, but you know, but yeah, it's there's a lot of ways to have fun. Winning is definitely fun, but you can try to find ways to do it more. But ultimately, I think maybe this is something we could visit in a future episode, trying to come up with solutions to these kind of things. But
yeah, I mean, right now we just keep talking about problems.
Yeah, we're just
helping anybody.
But I think we're just trying to bring, like, it's a very nuanced thing. It's a lot of people can be affected by a lot of different things, and just because something's hard to implement doesn't mean it shouldn't be. It's just you got to look at, you know, it from all different angles.
You got to take some time and work it out.
So yeah, it's always that balance of making it easy for people to make an entry point easier, making it not too difficult for people to get involved, while also reining in the guys at the top. Because I mean, it's a tough balancing act. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
no one wants to be tearing down their engines after every race. Just it would make it more, it would rein some teams in potentially that are taking some liberties there. But then, maybe some people don't want to have to deal with that or something. So
Right.
or that changes their costs by having to replace the parts that get damaged when rebuilding an engine, or so it's there's a lot there. But I guess changing gears from the club racing, well, I guess real quick, I mean, there were some club racing results that happened recently. I believe the most recent, talking about ChampCar, most recently the race at Barber Motorsports Park. I haven't gotten to go there yet. It's definitely on my bucket list.
Oh, it's huge on my bucket list. Especially so I obviously read a lot of bike things. It seems to be a fantastic motorcycle track, and they paved it, I think, might be 2 years ago now. I don't know. My entire sense of time with this whole COVID thing is out the window. Could be 1 year. I don't know. But apparently it's just fantastic, and I don't know who it is, but whoever owns it supposedly actually cares about it, rather than just a something they got in the way to make money, is into racing. So they I've been told, one of the reasons I really want to go there is they really take care of their facilities, and I really want to go. Yeah. I agree with you. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Yeah,
we can try to make it out there. But yeah, so it looks like I'm not sure if both races were wet, but I know there was some rain during that event, and so it looks like in first we got Birmingham Racing. We've seen them up there before in their SC300. Pinky's Out with their Aero car got second. I believe they also did really well at what was the other event previously? It was VIR North, of course, VIR North. So I believe they did well there. I think they won. I think when we covered that last, I couldn't find the results for the Saturday race, and I believe they won that one. And then the third, we got Tuttle Motorsports. Sometimes it can be a controversial team there. Another big team with the monies, but and some controversial, accidentally put the wrong engine in the car kind of situations. but yeah, but they're a good team, and they usually put some good people behind the wheel. So another good result for them in third there. And then we got 901 Motorsports. I believe that's a E30. Yep, in there in fourth. And then finally we have two guys in a Miata. I wonder if that's a Miata. It is a Miata. It's not false advertising there. So that's good. They get fifth place in that A-class win, that coveted A-class win.
Everybody
basically
wants that.
Best Honda / Miata.
Yeah, dude.
Trophy for the most part. Yeah, and that was the Saturday race. Sunday we have Visceral Racing Group in their Porsche 944 with the win there. They're usually up towards the front in a lot of these events. I think they potentially do the most races at anyone that I've seen. That seems like they're always, any event I've been to, it seems like they're there. We got Hong North in there. Oh, it looks like Mark III Supra. I'd love to see it. Pinky's Out getting another podium in third there. Tuttle getting another good result in fourth. And then, GMS Racing in there, I believe, somewhat freshly rebuilt RX-7 with the V6 swap. So some names, if you've been around ChampCar for a while, that you'd expect to see up there. So, but yeah, I'm sure everyone had a good time. Hopefully everyone had a good time. From the guys winning all the way down to the guys in last, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a bad day at the track is better than a good day at work.
That's true.
Right.
Although you can have some pretty bad days where
You can
you're
have
just
some horrendous days on track.
working on the car the whole time. But even then,
Yeah,
I'd
even
probably
then.
rather be doing that.
As long as I'm not stuck in a hospital for an extended length of time, better than a good day at work.
Yeah, hanging out with friends, even if you're wrenching on it, drinking beers, hanging out, it's still going to be a good time. So, but yeah, I mean, no Riley Corvette, so everyone had a chance.
There you go.
But yeah, that's. I think that's probably one of the last races of the season. I don't know. I don't think Sebring got moved from. That was usually New Year's, so. But yeah, so I'm sure it was a good time. Definitely, maybe try to do that one next year ourselves. So, but yeah, and I guess in other
come
races,
out there and 1v1 me.
in other racing news, I guess going back to some of the pro stuff at the end here.
Yeah, we kind of jumped with that Corvette stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we'll follow anything and everything here. So we don't have to be in any specific order here. But I guess going back to, we've talked a lot of Formula One in previous episodes, and they had the last race of the season, kind of relatively uneventful, at least compared to the last one. But you had Max Verstappen taking the win. It's always surprising when you don't see a Mercedes up there.
Yeah.
So that's 2 weeks in a row, no Mercedes winning a race. They must be shaking in their boots.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't already clinch the Constructors' Championship like 7 races ago, but they.
Toto Wolff better watch out.
Well, yeah, he better watch out. I believe he got re-signed to Mercedes. You'll love to see it,
Yeah.
But speaking of re-signing, we saw or new signings.
New signings.
We finally see some of the final seats. I think still Hamilton's seats still up in the air, but I think maybe Toto Wolff, his position getting sealed in, maybe that was what they were waiting for. But as far as kind of Red Bull, AlphaTauri, we had both of those kind of vacant seats being filled. So at AlphaTauri, we had Yuki Tsunoda. So I should be able to say these Japanese names.
You're supposed to.
Working at Toyota, but Tsunoda, I believe, is how you'd pronounce that. He's replacing Danny Kvyat. That's always a tough one to say. That I don't have to be able to say that one right because it's Russian. So yeah, that's the final seat. I believe Tsunoda. He finished 3rd in the Formula 2 championship this season, which he was the highest placed rookie. Because you have Mick Schumacher who won the championship. I believe it's his 2nd year in there. So as a rookie, a 3rd place is pretty good, and so he's able to be now promoted up to the big show, Formula One. So, but I think
Red Bull loves the rookies.
They do. So, but I guess not enough, because in the big Red Bull seat, we have Alex Albon losing out to Sergio Perez. So
yeah,
that's
well, it's sad for Albon.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like. I mean, you had Pierre Gasly struggling with Red Bull, and he went to AlphaTauri and got his first ever race win this year, and he seems to be doing really well. So it just seems like a really high pressure situation to be in that Red Bull seat. I mean, you have a lot of expectations around you. You have Max Verstappen, who's obviously very fast and is very well ingrained in the team and how they set up the car and everything. So it's gonna be hard to ever just come in there and try to beat someone at kind of their own game, basically. But yeah, I mean, maybe give him another year. I mean, I believe he's not like kicked out of Red Bull forever. I think he still has an opportunity maybe to come back in the years to come. But at least for next season, short term there, they just want a kind of maybe a more proven commodity in Sergio Perez, which, he showed a really good performance at that second to last race of the season. And got his first ever win. So maybe more wins to come from him, and maybe he can push Verstappen into and make the whole team just hopefully more consistent finishers, because Verstappen had a lot of incidents this year that prevented some good points finishes, and then when you have your second car just struggling to be in the top 10, it's going to be hard to be competitive, at least in the constructor standpoint. So
right.
So yeah, that's kind of your major F1 news there. And yeah, outside of Hamilton's seat, I think basically everyone's confirmed there. So I think we got some interesting driver comments. We got Fernando Alonso, potentially one of the, if not the greatest driver in the world, coming back to Formula One.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you ever watch a broadcast of any of them, IndyCar or IMSA and Daytona when he hops in, certainly seems like it.
Yeah.
All the news is on him.
He has a lot of popularity, that's for sure, and definitely a great driver.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just not even the greatest of drivers can beat a Mercedes when you're driving a Renault. So, but yeah, maybe they got some. Renault's got some podiums this year, so we could see Alonso on the podium again potentially next year. I think a lot of people would love to see that. Yeah, and potentially at the front, still going to be the same. Hamilton, Bottas, probably just running away from it. But there's some changes there. They got rid of their dual axis steering. They can't use it. There's some aero rules updates where the floor can't. They got rid of kind of some areas where they can shape the floor and also reduce the size of it. So, I mean, it's not going to just be. Although the manufacturers can use the same monocoque, the same tub as before. There's still some changes that maybe some teams can take advantage of. So,
right.
But we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of a short off season. You don't have to wait too long. In March, I believe, is when Australia, I guess, might be, and who knows with COVID and everything. But I think everyone's kind of figured out how to kind of work around it, I guess, for lack of a better word. But
no, it certainly seems that way.
Yeah, and
for the most part, anyway.
Yeah, and then I guess to finish it off with some last pro news. I mean, in IMSA, there's some changes coming in for. I mean, I think previously announced, but another classing structure. Now you have the LMP3 cars joining the main IMSA show. Yep.
Yeah, the WeatherTech.
Yep.
Paddock.
So that would be interesting to see that. So yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to next season. There always is. Can't wait. I mean, Daytona kind of around the corner.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we mentioned this in one of them, but they pushed it back towards the end of January.
Yeah, later than usual, but
later than usual, but still, there you go. You're back at it in January.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, there might be. I mean, there's always going to be news in the racing world. So whether it's amateur or pro, we'll be here to give our 2 cents.
That's right. So that's about all it's worth too.
That's about all it's worth. Actually, I mean, I'd take 1 cent.
Yeah, I mean, like one for each of us. That's about all it's worth.
Yeah. So, but yeah, well, for our 1 cent each, we'll still be here.
Yep.
Just because we can't stop talking about cars, and not many people want to listen to us just talk about cars for hours. So.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, everybody tells us to shut up when we're in public, so we just do this, and yeah, if you're interested, you can tune in.
Yeah,
so it works out.
So yeah, we'll be, we got a couple episodes in the bag now. We'll keep going, and yeah, thank you for listening to this one. It was another long one, but
another long one.
We're all about
despite our best efforts.
Yeah, we're all about bringing you guys all the content we can. So
that's right.
So. Yeah, well, until next time, we'll talk to you guys again.
Thanks for tuning in.